Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Get Inside Me show on Spreaker Radio. For those of you guys, I would like to tell you guys thank you so much for sending me your feedback on the advertisement about Ronald L. Allen, Bid Whist, the evolution about it. And he also has a book. If you check the link description down below, you will find where you can buy the book on Amazon. And you can also buy the book on his actual website, RonaldLAllen.com. You also were featured. Oh, I'm so sorry. You were also featured on a website for those who are for people who are very keen on reading. Hello, Mr. Ronald L. Allen. How are you doing?
Good evening. Good evening. How are you, Patu? Hello to you and your listening audience.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I was of course, we were just having a conversation not too long ago where I was telling you that I don't even know how to play Uno. So to me, it was so crazy on how I had so many people saying, whoa, I play great cards. I'm a great card player. I've never heard of this. And I would write to them that this is an actual game that's been out there for 150 years.
That's so true. So true.
So, if you don't mind, please, would you like to explain what Bid Whist is and the history of all of that?
Okay, well, let me just say very briefly, Bid Whist is a card game played with a standard playing card deck. Bid Whist is somewhat different because it uses all of the 52 cards in the deck, plus it also uses the two jokers. There's a red joker and a black joker. We call them the big joker and little joker. So all of those are used in the game Bid Whist. It's played by 4 players. They break up into teams of 2. And the game is very similar to bridge because there's an auction process in order to find out who will dictate how the game is played. So the first player will start and put out his bid, and we say 1, 2, 3, and then the second player gets a chance to bid, third player, and fourth player. Different from bridge where they get 2 or 3 opportunities to put a bid out there. In Bid Whist, there's only 1 bid. So each player gets 1 bid, and at the end of that four bid cycle, the player that has bid the highest, then they dictate how that hand will be played. And when I say played, a lot of games you've heard of spades and hearts and stuff like that. But in Bid Whist, if you don't have spades, then I may want hearts to be trumps or diamonds to be trump. The other unusual feature and very unique feature in Bid Whist is that in this game, not only do you use high cards dominant, if I have a hand that's situated low, now I can name low cards as the dominant cards. So for those of you who play cards, the normal ranking is ace, king, queen, jack, 10 all the way down. But in the game of bid, you can change it. Instead of ace, king, queen, it will be ace, 2, 3, 4, and up. So the deuce would be the second highest card. So that made the game very unique, and there are a lot of strategies that players use, and we enjoy using those strategies very much because now if you have a hand that may not match what you think the other players have, if you have a dominant suit, then you bid higher to get your suit into play. So if I were playing against you, and let's take an example that you had a bunch of spades, and you would bid a 5, and your intent was to name spades as the dominant trump, I would look at my hand and say, gee, I don't have any spades, or I have 1 spade, but I got 10 hearts. So I would outbid you. My auction bid would be higher. I would bid a 6. And when I win the bid, instead of spades, I would name heart trumps. So this is basically how the game is played, and you can use the same strategy and name clubs trumps or diamonds trumps, but that's the unique strategy of Bid Whist. Now, going to the history of the game, what's remarkable about the game is that today there are only 2 major card games that were ever invented in the United States, and I say major card games. And the first one and the most popular one is the game of poker. So next to that comes Bid Whist. Bid Whist is probably the second most popular game throughout the world. because it's been played in probably about a dozen countries. And how that applied to me and my connection and how I got involved is that bid whist is made in the United States, but it was made by slaves, either slaves or ex-slaves. They invented the game. Back in the days of slavery, the slaves were not allowed to learn to read or write, but the slave owners allowed them to learn how to count. And they didn't mind if they played cards, because the slave owners, plantation owners, figured that if the slaves could count, then they would be a more valuable asset, because then they could go around and do inventory and count bales of cotton or horses or whatever. So this is one thing that the slaves were able to do. So I became so intrigued with the game because the slaves were able to play this game because it's inexpensive. The only thing that they needed was a deck of cards and a flat surface to play cards on. So they could pick up a deck of cards out of the trash and they could play the game with them. And this was one of the few opportunities of enjoyment that they had, because they had very rough days. They worked long hours. When they got some free time, a lot of opportunities, well, not a lot of opportunities, but when the opportunity presented itself, many of them would enjoy playing a game of bid whist. And that's how the history became so rich to me. And the game started, we're saying, I cannot tell you specifically the year, but I can narrow it down that the game started somewhere between 1862 and 1868. So we have narrowed it down to that. And we know that the jokers were not invented until 1862, so the game, as we know it today, would have had to evolve after 1862. So those are some of the great history in the game. Remember when they started, transportation was horse and buggy, and it maintained itself and sustained itself through the trains and the automobile and the airplanes, and now we're into space travel, and bid whist is still with us. So that's just a brief history of the game.
Oh, no, trust me. Thank you so much for that brief history, because I'm telling you, when someone told me you never heard of it, I'm like, well, I'm not that great on games or card games, let alone to know what bid whist is. But what made me so excited to want to know about it was because I'm like, okay, this is something that started off with Black people. So this is part of African history, African American history, and a tradition that they've done that is 150 years old, that still to this day is being played. So that's why I was like, oh my goodness, this is cool.
It's interesting. I'm very surprised, but I understand that one survey we did, we found out that about 6 out of 10 African Americans played the game. But we found 7 or 8 of them were actually familiar with the game because they had a relative or uncle or cousin or niece or nephew that played the game. And we found that many, especially those Black people that attended college, in the colleges, it was almost like an elective subject. You find that most African Americans that attended college, especially if they went to one of the historically Black colleges, they know about the game. So don't feel bad because you don't, but it is a game that has been very popular in the Black community, and I shouldn't say it still is.
So far, from what I do know that you have won, and countless of opportunities and awards from playing this game, which is.
I have been lucky. I haven't played in major tournaments in probably about 15 years. But in the past, when I was somewhat younger, yes, I played in many major tournaments. I think the biggest tournament that I played was one by the Miller Brewing Company that went all across the country, and I ended up in the finals in the city of Chicago at White Sox Park. But they have 2 major organizations now, bid whist clubs, national clubs. One is the Card Shark organization, and the other is the National Bid Whist Association. And these 2 organizations have chapters in many, many cities. I couldn't tell you how many chapters that they have, but they're probably in just about every state. And they They play within the state, and then they gather at a national location, and they have a big national tournament. And they're having some tremendous prizes. They haven't got to the thing of poker or golf or anything like that. You know, you're not winning $100,000 or anything of that nature, but they have some significant prizes in the range of probably about $25,000 for first place. So the main thing is that when the people are playing Bid Whist, they're having a lot of fun. It's really a fun game. We talk a lot of trash, you know, and it's just so enjoyable. If you talk about trash talking, Bid Whist is the game where all of the trash talking in the black community came about.
So how were you introduced into Bid Whist? Was that through college, through family members, growing up watching them play, or it was something that you're like, you know what, since I already kind of play some cards, let me see what's out there?
Well, you know what, I'm glad you asked that, and it's one of the motivating factors for me writing the book, because as a young teenager, and I'm from the city of Chicago, and I had lived on the south side most of my life, and then in my early teens, I moved to the west side, but I got away from all my school classmates, and I didn't know a lot of people. And at that time in Chicago, it was really sort of the evolution of the gangs. And if you were not a member of the gang, then you were recruited. If you were not recruited and accepted into the gang, then you were chased. So I had a lot of difficulty trying to get home at night after school, and I have to run through the alleys or take the side streets. But I was fortunate and blessed enough to meet a young, well, not a young lady at that time. She was a mature lady, but her name was Mrs. Prince. And Mrs. Prince lived on the west side and had two daughters. And to keep her daughters off the street, she invited all of the young people over to her house after dinner, and we would go over and she taught us how to play Bid Whist. So after after a few months and we learned how to play, then we just played it on our own, and our group expanded. More and more people came by, and she tolerated all of these young people in her house. And I mentioned in my book that there was such a bond between everyone that came over. None of the young people that played in our house, none of the people ever had any criminal activities, criminal records. They all went on to go finish high school and go to college, and all obtained good jobs and became good citizens. So I'm glad you asked that question, because it was meaningful, and it did have the game of Bid Whist had a tremendous impact on my life.
Now, for yourself, with the whole game of Bid Whist, because not only do you sell your book on your website for the RonaldLAllen.com, but you also have it being sold at Barnes & Nobles and Amazon. And of course, they have their way of saying how tremendously great this book is. And you've also had a feature for the month from ReadersWritersJournals.com, which you guys can also see the link on the description box down below, which had, oh my goodness, such a beautiful, great contribution of their thoughts of you as a writer, you as an individual, and the whole Bid Whist, and how detailed you were about the history of it all.
Oh, thank you. That was such a warm moment, and I received an email from them on July 4th of all days, because I had requested, made a kind request that they review my book, because yes, I had a very warm response from all the Bid Whist players and Black History buffs that had read my book. But now we're talking about people, and I'm saying, well, what do my critics, what are my professional reviewers, what are they going to say? So I was looking out for, looking to obtain professional reviews from newspaper, television critics, or whatever. And Reader's Writers Journal was one of the first to respond. And that reviewer, I don't know her last name, her first name is Liz. She sent me this very warm email that I got on July 4th, and saying that she really, really enjoyed my book. And she picked up on the history part of it. She said, "This is a history within the history." Those were her words. And so they have began to help me in the promotion. And I've had so many people that have sent me an email or given me a phone call since then. So I'm very excited about that.
So luckily you had the opportunity to say, you know what, I want to. It's kind of your story of how you started into bid whisk, I could only imagine like if it was put in film because it sounds so vintage and cool, like just like Harlem Nights type of thing where instead of it's like you're fighting against the evils of the streets and then the whole of what situation of how Chicago was at the time. So instead, this woman, this young lady, decides to turn her home into a young good luck club where you guys get to have like your own Harlem Nights.
Oh yes, and I you know what, I cannot emphasize enough. I've been going across the country when I have the opportunity, and I share with your listening audience. I was trying very, very, very strongly to have this year be recognized as the 150th year anniversary of the Bid Whist, and I had asked the Congress people and state legislators to at least do a proclamation for the game of Bid Whist, because this 150th year anniversary is never going to come back again, and I just felt they were so important to have it recognized within our community. And Bid Whist, if I can share with your audience. Many of our young people, they think about sports as a way out of whatever economic challenges that they have. But many of our young people don't play basketball well. They don't play baseball well. They're not. Some of them are not physically coordinated. You also have people that have physical handicaps. Well, Bid Whist is a game that everyone can participate in. You don't have to have the physical skills. And also in playing the game, you would be surprised that it really gives you an overall development of your math skills, of your strategizing, because you learn how to tackle obstacles and you'll have obstacles in life, and you know how to do those, and you know how to make detours, how to back up, how to turn left, how to turn right. So I'm just saying that, in my opinion, there's a lot of life skills that you can learn from the game of Bid Whist.
Now, I also see that you were a very adept and skillful, other than being an adept, skillful Bid Whist player, and that you have experience in this game for over 55 years. I see that you're also a retired high school teacher, and you also were a CEO in insurance with prior investigation training, where you did claims and adjusting.
Yes.
So,
well, see, that was basically most of my career. I started my career in education, and I taught in one of the public high schools in the city of Chicago. And there were some challenges within public school systems, as there are in many cities. So I left the field of education, and I went into insurance. And originally I started as a claims adjuster, and that required investigative skills because I handle injury claims, so we had to investigate and find out whether it was fraudulent or legitimate and what the value of the claim would be. So those investigative skills helped me actually in doing the book, because in trying to, I don't know whether many of your audience have really gone back and tried to do a genealogy search. But as you try to find your family roots and whatnot, you will find that there's a great deal of difficulty, because a lot of our history, a lot of our information, our birth certificates, our death certificates, our marriage certificates, none of those things were ever kept. Very, very seldom. The only thing that they did was list a slave by his name and male or female and what the approximate age was. So in trying to research Bid Whist, I really had a lot of difficulty because there were no printed documents, or very few printed documents that I could use for my research. So I did use all the printed documents that I could find from different people, and I went to the Library of Congress and main libraries in any of the cities that I could get to. But I found that my investigative procedures made me say that our community, the black community, was one that didn't write the stories down, because remember, we couldn't write, but we could relay the stories to our progenies. To the grandparents would relay it back to the kids and grandkids, and the stories were kept until after the slaves were free and they began to write diaries. Then I was able to go back, and there were many people that opened their doors and shared the personal diaries of their mother or their grandmother, and I was very happy to do that, and I've always tried to be respectful of the information that I found in those diaries. But that is where I began to put the pieces together about bid whist.
Now, I'm sure that you have a lot of people who are very great at bid whist and those who are into card games. I could only imagine how thrilled and how honored they are to actually play with someone who is as skillful as you, but also decided to say, you know what, I'm going to write a book on it. And, for your the fellow people that you play the card games with, and or those who never heard of it until the book, what are some of their thoughts on, wow, like I'm actually speaking to Mr. Ronald L. Allen?
Well, you know what? I appreciate you, and thank you much for that accolades. Now, don't get me beat up, because some of your listeners out there, I'm not the world's greatest bid whist player, and I don't claim to be. But those who have played with me or against me, they know I'm a very competitive person. But the one claim that I can make is that I believe right now, in the year 2015, that I can claim to be the chief historian on the game. Mm-hmm. But I enjoy being competitive, and I won't lay down. If you come to play me in the game of bid whist, then you better bring a lunch, because it's not going to be a quick task. You're going to spend some time there, okay?
So, how is it possible for one to be able to sign up for bid whist? Is there a special website, a special club that you enter, or like where would someone go to say, you know what, I want to find a fellow bid whist player?
Well, there are a number. Right now, I think there are about 13 million people that are playing bid whist online.
Wow.
And as I said, we play with people from all over the world. I have friends in England and France and Italy, Norway, Sweden, Alaska, one in Antarctica. And it's fun. There's a lot of opportunities, because right now, like I know my friend who's in Spain, there's like a 7-hour time difference. Mm-hmm. So we're playing now, and all of a sudden he'll say, well, I got to go, folks. I'm sleepy. I'm tired. I've stayed up too late. And we say, well, because now it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning over there, and they're still playing bid whist. But I make that point to say, if you go online playing on the computer, you can find a bid whist game online just about any time of the day.
Okay.
Now, for those of you that in cities, if you go online, if you look at as I said, the Card Shark or the National Bid Whist Association, if you go into their website, you will find that there is a club in your city, or if you're living in one of the larger cities or close to your city. I just had a conversation with a young lady last week, and she's in Westerfield, Ohio. But she went online and she found a club that was about 60 miles from her in Columbus. So she was on her way when we spoke. Well, I'm going to Columbus tonight, and I'm going to the club, the Bid Whist Club. And I told them I didn't know how to play, but they told me to come on in, and they would be happy to have me. So these are the stories that I'm getting back from people across the country.
Wow. Now, seeing that, I said, I don't even know how to play Uno. And I know a lot of people like, Uno, simple game. Yeah, but I didn't grow up, because my parents are from the island, so I didn't grow up with dominoes, soccer, like things like that is more prominent. Card games are too, but I've never heard of bid whist. So I'm assuming bid whist has to be just only an American, like African American game. I don't know. I'm thinking probably if I did a little research, I'll probably find some where people actually brought it over to the Caribbean and stuff like that.
Well, I would hope so, and it went across the globe in a lot of instances with our military, our black men and women who were in the military. Army, Air Force, Marines, or whatever, especially when they went away to war or when they were stationed overseas, that this was a game of choice, and they were always looking for 3 other friends where they could sit down and have a game of bid whist. So this is how it spread overseas.
Now, everyone knows the game of bridge, or the or if they don't know the game of bridge or how to play, like I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard of bridge.
Okay.
I've heard of poker. So I'm like, okay, I don't know how to play either, but I've heard of it. And you've actually said that Bid Whist actually outbeats bridge.
It does at this time. Bridge at one time was the leading card game in the world. And then poker, which started in about 1829, eventually as we got into the 1900s, it surpassed bridge. And there was a wane in playing bridge, and now Bid Whist ranks second to poker in the game that's usually played with people who play cards.
Wow.
And I have to give credit for a lot of your listeners. My research actually showed that Bid Whist was really fathered by the game of bridge.
Really?
Yeah, but people that read my book, and they'll see I put a profile on there and document why I feel this way. And now this is my conclusion, and I substantiate that with the profile and showing why I feel this way. There's no official documentation, but I'm very confident with my profile because we see at least 4 major factors that are similar to the game of bridge, but have no similarities to other games. So that's why I feel that Bid Whist would actually come from bridge. And remember now, going back to it was invented by the slaves. Mm-hmm. And I point out in my book that our slave ancestors, they didn't have a lot of resources or commodities or whatever. All they had was the clothes on their back and the scrap of food, that they picked up. Some of them even didn't have shoes. They only had one pair of pants or one shirt. So they didn't want to waste anything. So when they were getting the decks of cards, and I'm figuring that they got it from the trash or off the kitchen table when the master was through with it, now they're playing with these cards and they're inventing this game. Then the jokers came out. Now the slaves said, oh, we got 2 new cards. And that's what bridge did not have, jokers. So they said, well, what are we going to do with this? And our slave ancestors, they didn't throw anything away. They were going to, if it could be used, it would be used. They didn't, from the slave quarters, very little went into the trash. So when the jokers came out, we're going to have to adapt this into the game, and they put the jokers in the game and made some adaptations, and that's where we get Bid Whist.
I can definitely say that Mr. Ronald L. Allen. The reason I'm saying your name in full is for those who want to Google and search. You are definitely a very fascinating human being. And the book, for those of you guys who may not know, the book name is called The Evolution of Bid Whist by Ronald L. Allen. And I can honestly say from this interview, for it only to be 30 minutes long, I am so thankful that you were able to get into detail and explain what it is, because I was just so I don't know what, because I don't even know how to play cards.
Well, you know what? I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share with your audience, because Bid Whist has a rich heritage, and it's an American game, but especially it's an African-American game. It's gone through many of our families. In my book, I trace it from the Pullman porters and the black college students that went to the historical black colleges, and we go all the way up in from the Pullman porters. One thing that I'd like to point out to your audience, and I could not put the connection, but Michelle Obama, our first lady, she's the descendant of a Pullman porter, and I had found some indications in some articles saying that the Obama family liked to play Bid Whist. In President Obama's book, when he wrote his book, oh my goodness, I can't think of the name of it right now. Days of My Father, or something about his father. But he mentioned many days on the South Side where he would sit and watch the older people playing Bid Whist outside in his neighborhood. So there's heritage all the way. My favorite basketball players are Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain, and wouldn't you know it, they're great Bid Whist players, and they enjoy the game. So there's just so much heritage there, and there's a bond, and it decreases the degrees of separation, because if you play Bid Whist and you're sitting and you're talking to someone, eventually you can say, hey, do you know so-and-so? Oh, yeah, I know them. Do you know Patu? Oh, yes, I know her. And, so it really decreases the degree of separation. Eric Holder, our former Attorney General, he was a great Bid Whist player. Carolyn Mosley Braun, who was our first African-American senator. She was a bid whist player. And lastly, I'd say every year in Washington, D.C., the United States Congress, the representatives, they have the Black Congressional Caucus. They have a bid whist tournament every year, annually. So there's a lot of connections and relationships to the Black community in the game of bid whist.
I'm telling you, listeners, you definitely want to check out this book, The Evolution of Bid Whist by Ronald L. Allen. And please, definitely check out the beautiful month spread that they put out for him. You'll find all the information and links down below for readers, writers, and journals. You can also purchase the book on Ron Allen's website. Is RonaldLAllen.com, and you can also purchase the book on Barnes & Nobles and Amazon, but you'll also find those links as well on his website. Thank you guys for listening. You have a blessed